Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chai Chat and Community. My name's Anushka, and today we're going to be discussing men's mental health, just like within the community, I think. I've got with me Jagesh Panchal and Dev Panchal from Shakti Mental Health, Chris Tran from Enhancing Minds. Sorry, I'm on two different laptops. And I've got Dan Solomon from Blokes Psychology. So some very experienced people in the area of men's mental health. I guess the reason that we're doing this topic today is, well, it's Men's Health Awareness Month, for anyone who doesn't know that. And we've had Men's Mental Health Day was recently as well. And this topic around stigma and mental health has been huge recently. In fact, I was doing some research and I found out that on average, 1 in 8 men will experience depression and 1 in 5 men will experience anxiety at some stage of their lives. Blokes make up an average of 7 out of every 9 suicides every single day in Australia. And the number of men who die by suicide in Australia every year has almost doubled. And I think there was like a whole study in 2007 that sort of looked at, mental health and well-being, and it found that only 27.5% of males with a mental health disorder and recent symptoms get access mental health services as opposed to their female counterparts. So 40% of females will go and ask for support and seek out help, but not that many men will. And I guess the real question is, why don't men seek out mental health support despite facing such significant issues? And I guess that's what we're going to be looking at exploring today. Just before we get started, I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we now call Australia, and on whose lands we live and work, and on whose lands we have lived and worked on in the past, present, and emerging future. So I'm going to pass this around to the panelists for a little, if you can tell me a little bit about yourselves before we get into questions. So I might start with you, Chris.
Sure thing. So I'm Chris. I'm a psychologist and personal skills coach from Enhancing Minds. My job is basically to help people get a bit more control in their lives and help with practical steps towards whatever goals that they have. I work with all sorts of people, and I also have a special interest in working with people who have grown up in immigrant families.
Amazing. Dev?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dev. I work with my twin brother, Jay, for Shakti Mental Health. Full-time, I do full-time work as an insurance consultant. To be honest, I think I'm just quite happy just to be around such experienced and like-minded people. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here, guys.
Cool. Jagesh, do you want to go next?
Yeah, that probably makes sense. My name's Jagesh. I'm founder of Shakti Mental Health Melbourne. Shakti embraces and supports and communicates for South Asian mental health in the Australian South Asian community and diaspora. And besides that, I work for the Centre for Multicultural Youth as a youth project officer.
Amazing. Thank you. And Dan, what about you?
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I am a psychologist. Say that again, sorry?
Oh, no, you're good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm a psychologist. I have been working in the space for men for a little while. When I was doing my master's course, I worked at Men's Line Australia, taking calls, and then got qualified and now working at Blokes Psych. And yeah, like Chris was saying about a special interest area, mine's probably leading into changes in.
Is Dan gone for everyone else?
Yeah.
I think we have some technical difficulties there.
I think he's. Oh, there we go.
He's back.
Yeah, but you're good. Sorry, Dan, you kind of cut out there for a second. Yeah, you're back. Oh, no, he's not.
No worries. I'm back. Cool.
He's definitely paused, right?
Can you hear? Oh, no. Am I there?
Yeah.
No.
You keep cutting out.
It's cutting in
You can
and
hear
out.
me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's better.
Oh no. All right, I'll get that sorted and I'll come back soon, okay?
Okay,
Okay.
no worries. Thank you. I guess while we're waiting for him, I wanted to sort of ask the general question: why is mental health important to you? Because I mean, obviously, Chris and I are psychologists, but there's always a reason for why you come into this field, and you guys are working in mental health and in very specific space as well for Shakti. So, like, just wanted to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So you got Jay. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. Happy to start. So I think mental health is important for us. A lot from lived experience of growing up. So I think mental health isn't something that was really discussed for Dev and I growing up in a South Asian household, and I felt like we really needed to take on that discussion ourselves when we were older, because it wasn't something that, as a family, we really talked about a lot. None of my elders really talked about it a lot, and it wasn't until I started the conversation from us to my parents that we started discussing it a bit more. And again, that's no like lapse on my parents at all. I think it was more that they weren't ever like taught about it enough. So how are they supposed to tell us about it? So if you're not passed down that mental health conversation, and then you're grown up with all these like trauma sometimes of depression or like family arguments, or where are you supposed to bottle it up, that like emotional energy, and how you're supposed to get that out. So I think it's important to me because at the end of the day, I don't want other South Asians going through what I kind of experienced. So I want others of either South Asian background or culturally diverse backgrounds to find support, easily find support, accessibility. And I don't want others to go through what like Dev and I went through. So I want other people to see like, this is where my channels are, this is where I find support, and this is who I can go to if something does happen. So it's really just advocating that whole communication and making sure those channels are open so other people can easily access the support when they need it.
No, that's really great. I really love that. I think, so I'll pass it on to Dev.
I have a very similar journey to Jay as well, but at the end of the day, for me, it really comes back to not wanting a younger South Asian child or someone else that used to be in my position going through that same thing as well. Because we have that lived experience and we have been through our own struggles of depression, anxiety, and not being able to speak to someone. I know that I can make a difference now through Shakti, through lived experiences, through sharing perspectives. And it really comes back to not having someone, it really comes back to, my apologies, just went blank. It comes back to not having someone that is like a 16-year-old self, not have those options anymore, because we can't give them those options. Yeah.
No, I resonate with that a lot, because I think that's the reason that I started Umeed, was because I think within our space there wasn't enough South Asian support, and so it's essentially you're trying to fill the gaps that you saw growing up, which I think is wonderful. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you guys say that stuff, because I think there's like my background is East Asian and Southeast Asian, and there's similarities there, right? And it's not just cultural, right? Like there are a lot of different reasons why families, no matter if they're culturally diverse or not, might not talk about mental health. And for me, it's the fact that our mental health that everyone has, it affects our abilities to do the things that we want to do and achieve the things that we want to do. So like it kind of resonates in all parts of our lives. But having our kind of lived experience with our parents, potentially not knowing some of this stuff or not prioritizing this because they had to prioritize feeding us and housing us, right? Or not dealing with not dealing with their traumas and their all of their experiences. That kind of affects our generation, on top of all that other stuff, right? Like the shame and all that stuff as well. So look, I do notice in our kind of groups, you might have people who crave the approval of other people, might be a bit more guarded around other people, or might do things to cope that might be a bit more unhealthy, like turn to substance use and things like that. So yeah, a lot of reasons why it's important.
Yeah, cool. I'm gonna pop over to Dan in a second. Just on the note of like you guys talking about Southeast Asian mental health. I know we've talked a lot about the stigma for like within the community in itself, but looking at the stats that I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, this just popped into my mind. I know that we talked about women seeking out help more than men. Do you think that's exacerbated within the South Asian community? Do you feel like maybe, I don't know, like from your experiences, do you just feel like that's something that happens? Like, is it worse off? Do we not seek the support that we're supposed to? Because I think traditionally, like, men have a specific role, you know?
I think it's yeah, I think that point is very valid because, like, just for the examples that we go off, a lot of our Shakti perspectives that we do, they're very much based towards female genders. So when we do a call out for, we'd love to get people involved in sharing their experiences with mental health, we get way more females from South Asian background willing to share their experience of what they've been through, what they want to discuss, and support they want to give to when men want to do it. I think that's the reason why we have Men's Mental Health Month, to really broadcast and emphasize that men really should start talking about this. And I think we find more that we like with Shakti, and this is just our experience, that we have to reach out to men more than they come to us and say, hey, we want to share something. Instead, sometimes it feels like we have to go out to men and be like, hey, would you be interested in sharing something? Whereas more women are, it's the other way, where they find our platform and say, hey, we would love to share what we've been through and share this discussion. I think that a lot of that's from just the stigma of being a man and like talking about mental health. And I think it's just a lot of that from not having an avenue of like of having to say, I want to share this now, instead it's waiting for someone to come up to you and say, hey, do you want to share? So we'd like to, in the long run, be it the other way around, where more men come up to us, or just in general, and say, we would love to share our experiences and I really need to talk about what I'm going through, instead of it feeling like someone's coming up to you and asking, hey, are you okay? Do you want to share something with us? Because I think there's a lot of men who are out there who do want to share something, or do want to talk about what they've been through, but they're just not confident or comfortable enough to start that conversation themselves.
No, I think that's a great point. I've got something on that note in a second, but I guess we've got a question here. What are some things that you think are gender specific when it comes to mental health, and e.g. how men are socialized? Dan, I might throw this one to you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. So specific to men, I think that the way that men experience emotion might be, a little bit in terms of socialization and what we kind of understand about men and how they experience emotion. I think that a lot less is kind of understood socially in what people are kind of looking for around, the depth of the difficulties of what men go through. And in terms of the socialization aspects, when you go back a little bit, and I'm speaking from the Australian kind of culture and kind of the Industrial Revolution onwards type setup there, where you have earlier 20th century men going out and working, and it very much was men going out, and they were utility based. They were they were the means of production to, and so it was very, can you work, can you be functional for the household? Well, if you can, good, and that's kind of it, right? You don't have to go much deeper than that emotionally, and so going into, I suppose, how men's emotions are understood, only more in the last few decades have we really kind of looked a bit deeper into how men are kind of coping, and even men themselves, I think, are only really come to grips in the last couple of decades into the complexities of how we feel, and and only a lot more recently giving permission to each other to feel. And that's where I think Jagesh was really kind of saying, I'd almost add to that to say that when men don't know what to say, if they're not coming forward and kind of talking about it, there could be an element of, I don't feel right, but I have no idea what's going on. So maybe maybe I won't talk. Maybe I'll just stay silent because I don't understand.
No, that's such a great insight. I also have a question, I guess, based on the fact that Bloke Psychology is, I guess, marketed and directed at men, right? So it's like some mental health support for men specifically. And so I was about to ask, I guess, between you and Chris as well, in terms of like, how often do you think men are coming into practice, Chris, for you, and B, to Dan, what are some of the more common issues that you see in therapy with men? Because I like putting it out there to be like, you know what, you in my head, you can go to therapy for anything. It doesn't matter. Everything could be super swell in your life, and it's okay for you either not to be okay. It's okay for you to be okay. You just want to come and talk. That's fine as well. But yeah, what are sort of the common things that we're seeing?
In the last, it's through COVID, and in the last 18 months to 2 years, I was thinking about this earlier, actually, and I was thinking probably the most concise way to put it would be disconnection.
Yeah,
I think that disconnection with your workplace, disconnection with family, disconnection with friends, and I think that a lot of people coming in are talking a lot about relationship breakdowns, a lot of loneliness, loss of the ability to do the things that they love, and a lot of that is leading to low moods and probably what it would present like mostly if you needed to look at the diagnostics of it. I'd say that it looks a little bit like the depressions and kind of low mood and kind of loss of interest. Yeah.
Cool. Chris, what about you? What are you seeing in practice?
That's so interesting that you use that word, Dan, disconnection, because I feel like it overlaps a lot with my clients in a similar but different way. Because like I guess being a bloke, I'm probably getting more male clients than say some female psychologists might.
I definitely not. I have very limited. I think the clients that I tend to see are mostly women, less. Yeah, I don't have a lot of men.
Yeah, and that's what I expected for a while, but like just on Friday, like I reckon 80% of my day was seeing male clients. And I guess the reasons are kind of similar to what you're saying, Dan, because the majority of the clients I'm seeing are people who are either completely estranged from their families, or they have tense relationship with family members. And that could be for a number of reasons. And the core thing is that, their mental health is being impacted by one or more of their family members, right? It could be like a clash in values. It could be a suspected personality disorder within one of the family members that's impacting on them.
Yeah.
Right. And similar to what Dan was saying, like I've got people who have stresses coming from work, how they're treated by other people at work, and also people who, want to work on their motivation, want to work on reducing procrastination and being a bit more productive and improving themselves. So that's what I'm noticing at the moment.
That's really, really interesting. I guess one of my questions then from there on would be, what are some gender-related barriers to accessing mental health support? What do you think? And this is just to everyone on the panel. What do you think are the barriers, and how can we overcome those barriers as well?
I think from a male perspective, when it comes to putting your hand up and making that first step to say, maybe I do need help, or maybe I do need to speak to someone, I think a lot of the time, from what I've experienced, males don't want to be seen as putting their hand up and going to mental health because they might appear or come off as weak, or they need help, or they're not strong-hearted. A lot of these misconceptions happen through upbringing at the same time as well. But I think one of the biggest barriers is that men don't want other people to know that they are going to go and seek professional mental health. And like Anushka was saying earlier before, it's never too late to go get help for your mental health, because like you were saying beforehand, Chris, mental health, it affects everything. If you're going to have a problem in one perspective, it's going to affect what you do on a daily basis for just normal day-to-day tasks. So I think for me, it's men don't want to be seen as, oh, that guy went and got mental health. Maybe he's crazy. It's a misconception, and it's okay to get help. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good point.
That's a really, really great point. Does anyone else want to add to that? What are some gender-related barriers to accessing mental health support for men?
I think that Dev makes a really good point. I think that that weak strong dichotomy that a lot of men kind of are brought up with, like, if it, it's weak to cry, it's a lot of these internalized messages that not every family has that within it, but even still you will come across people who do role model that strong, that's a silent, strong, stoic kind of persona. And a lot of that is unfortunately in society aligned closely with success and economic wealth and things like this. And so that level of emotional vulnerability is probably less put forward as a really strong kind of masculine goal. And so that's a really good point you raised there, Devin. I think that a lot of it would come back to not wanting to be perceived as weak. And just further is, I'd probably say that just slightly different to that, I'd say that maybe the signs in seeing it in others as well might not be obvious, because we haven't spent as much time in the space of male vulnerability and what male mental health kind of really looks like, and because it hasn't really been broadcast, the signs to do with what the symptoms of being depressed, being overworked and burnt out, or being anxious, how they look in men may not be completely known by the masses. So to inquire may not be, you may not just readily go and ask somebody.
That's great. I love that. That both really, really good points. I guess on that note, what do you guys think would be, how do we overcome these barriers? How do we actually, what do you think would be the way to get past this? I mean, obviously having a conversation like this is one thing, but what are some other, what needs to change, I guess, in the community, in society, maybe even within ourselves?
I guess you go.
No,
I
just chatting.
All right, cool. I was just gonna say, like, I guess as health practitioners, like we need to listen to the people we support, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to find out what's going to make it easier for them, and what things that make it harder that we need to kind of get rid of, right? So, I don't know, are our materials or our websites or whatever, not very accessible, right? That sort of stuff. Our language, is our language not accessible to ordinary people? Like, are we talking like we're at uni kind of thing? Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think you're right. Forums like this, you mentioned Shapes and Sounds. There's a group of honours students in Victoria who are creating a board game to create some structure for talking about mental health.
Love that. All about board
games. Brilliant.
What does the board game involve? Like, is it prompts about questions, or like what does the game involve? I'm so interested.
Yeah. Well, they're in the design process at the moment, so there's a few ideas pushed around, but they're called Push and Pull. So if you follow, like, if you try and search them, I'll try and find their details too to share it around. Like, it will be exciting to see what comes. And then I guess the last thing is, I feel like places like Men's Shed are really good at this. They look at like how men spend their time, right? If we equip each other and people at those kinds of places, we can kind of help them support people who are having a rougher time.
Yeah. I guess I want to go into the nitty-gritty parts of this, because I know you guys are probably going to also go into being like, oh, we should talk about it, but like, talk about what exactly? Like, what should conversation be looking like? Because I want to demonstrate this. I'm big on being like, let's have a demonstration of what this looks like.
I think, real quick, in my experience, I think it has to grow from like your friends group first. So within your your men's friend group, or your like the boys chat or whatever, you need to feel comfortable with bringing up if you're going through something in your in your first friends group first, because they're the ones that you're going to turn to a lot. They're the ones that you discuss stuff with all the time. So if you can't tell that to like a public channel like social media or Instagram, and you can't get support there, how are you going to find support with talking to like your best mates? So I think that conversation needs to start from there, and your friends need to be supportive in that aspect as well. So if you're going through depression, or if you're going through like, I'm just having a really trash time, and I need someone, I need you guys to be aware of this, and I need, some support from this. That needs to be circulated as well. Because it's all good sharing it on Facebook and that, and people commenting, be like, I stand with you, or if you want to reach out, let me know. But your mates are like your go-to. So it doesn't matter if it's like on the footy field, if it's just like a chat at a barbecue, if you're going out for a drink, you need to be comfortable with talking about that with your your best friends, and then being reciprocating those feelings that we understand you. If you need a chat with us, like let's do that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I absolutely I'd back that up, because that's so true. If you can, and my mind's just going to your mates would be amazing to go to. So we need to get all of your mates from the very beginning of when they become your mates. If it's primary school or early high school, we all need to be on this journey together of understanding how important mental health is. So education programs and kind of getting it into the school curriculums, and having that kind of happen would be a really good way to get that, taking it serious rather than having a joke because everyone's uncomfortable. From the very base level, it's well understood. Definitely.
That's actually a really great point. When should conversation start? Because I work at a high school full time as well, and I mean, I'm big on having these conversations, and I see it a lot in the schoolyard where kids boys will come into like my office and they'll be like, "Oh, but miss, like I don't need to talk about my feelings because that means I'm like less of a person," or like my dad says that you're not supposed to say these things, or there's actually nothing wrong with me. I don't understand why I've been sent here, and it's such a defensive sort of way. Like when we come to talking about mental health, I see a lot of like they're on the defense, and I guess like how do you think we can start, I guess, breaking down these barriers earlier on with young people?
I think it has
it
would have to. Sorry, go, Chris. Yeah.
I think it's the delay, isn't it? It's interesting you bring up kids, Anushka, because I think like Dan and Anushka, you guys probably experience this, and Dan and Jagesh, I'm not sure how much you deal with kids with this sort of stuff, but when you chat with kids about uncomfortable emotions, like you get a range of responses, right? And you have those kids that get really defensive and either try and avoid it or might act out if the subject of uncomfortable emotions come up. And you guys might have done this, right? Like you kind of start by taking the spotlight off them and like talking about someone else, right? Like whether it's like a fictional character or something, right? Or a reference point that someone else might know of. When you're talking with family, you might bring up someone else in the family first and kind of open the door a little bit. That's one little thing that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah,
I love that.
Definitely. I was going to say in terms of when to begin looking at it, I know that a lot of the reference points socially come about as hitting adolescence. So I think hitting this kind of stuff in primary school with emotional literacy and kind of promoting vulnerability in those earlier years, not too young, but the 8s, 9s, 10s, to really normalize it for the child, that when they hit that that 13, 14, where they go through that big social change, a lot more vulnerable, it's been 4 to 5 years of being normalized, and structurally they see it as, well, this is just part of life, rather than something they have to learn alongside all of the social vulnerability.
I think absolutely, I agree with you in that perspective. And for me, I personally wish that I had a psychiatrist or some sort of a mental health professional when I was going to public schools, And the great thing is now is that I've heard that more and more public schools are having a designated mental health professional on campus. Do you know what this means for kids? Like, it means that they can just, if they're having a breakdown in class, if something happens on the footy oval, they can go and see someone straight away. When we went to high school, we didn't have that opportunity. And I wish I had that opportunity because, like Dan was saying beforehand, years 8, 9, and 10, these are very developmental periods for young adolescent people. It's where you kind of really coming of age situation. And for people now to get that professional mental help at that age, I think it's just going to go such a long way to making these people not like better people, but they're just going to be able to deal and cope with mental health better because they have that professional mental health there now. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I agree with the points that you've just made there, but also on what Dan was saying about emotional sorry, my words today. What Dan was talking about in terms of emotional literacy. So last year I did a lot of work with young children, and I think one of the things that we started to introduce into school spaces at primary schools anyway is things like the zones of regulation. So even just discussing like, what color is associated with what like feeling. And it's really important because the number of people that I see, and even with men, that aren't able to articulate why they're feeling a certain way. So if you're feeling angry, there's probably like a ton of other things that are happening underneath that. And what you were saying there about like having access to mental health support in schools, so important. As someone who works at a high school, like you're right, the moment that something happens, the number of boys that now, instead of getting in a fight, will be like, I'm going to Wellbeing instead to see Anushka, has like, it's been incredible this year. Yeah, like they'll come and they'll be like, oh,
Brilliant.
yeah, no, it's great. I had a kid who just, like we've got so many different kids, but like, they're like, I've noticed that now because we've built rapport, they actively will like message me on Teams and be like, hey, miss, like I'm actually doing good. Or they'll come past my office and give me a thumbs up. And like, or be like, I'm gonna, yeah. Or like, instead of getting, like I said, into fights, they'll be like, okay, no, my plan of action is now I'm going to go to Wellbeing. I'm going to sit outside her office. Or I'll sit in the office. And they come in and we don't have to talk about what happened, but it's just like, you've got another space now. And if we need to talk about it, then we will. And we get to the root of like, what's actually going on for them.
That's a massive win. Yeah.
Huge win. Yeah. I think, it's so important.
That there I see as such an important thing for men in society, more broadly, what you've just said there, the ability to self-regulate.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues that we have with substance use, with, violence and the suicide rates, a lot of the pain that men feel and to know how to manage that, and to learn that at that young age, by the time it gets to the, life stresses and they're working or whatever later on in life, well, they've learnt it already at that age. And so, it changes that trajectory for these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's letting them know that at such a young age, it's okay to have these conversations at a young age is so important.
But also, like, you're equipping them with the tools. And I always talk about this, but like having the emotional tools and learning that throughout life is so important, because even if, whatever you learn right now, if you're going to therapy, or even, just by talking to your friends, that, being able to have that conversation and stuff, that stuff you will use later in life. It's not like you will have one problem and then all your problems are done for the rest of your life. I wish it was like that. I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to continue having like life as a roller coaster. So whatever you learn from each thing, and the more that you learn to have these emotional regulation tools in your box, the more you'll be able to, I guess, utilize them and like transfer those skills on later in life, right?
And practice using those tools for a longer period of time, rather than just getting them, like when you're well into adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, on the note of young people, Dev and Jagesh, like you, Jagesh especially, I think you're working a lot with young people at the moment in the community. And I was kind of wondering, what are some trends of the conversations that are happening amongst young people around men's mental health, and how does, I guess, the community support or hinder these trends?
Oh, yeah, no, good question. It's gonna play like kind of a devil's advocate, but I feel like that conversation isn't happening enough, especially for young men in the community. I see it a lot from I work with a lot of like young people from refugee and migrant background, And I feel like that conversation isn't happening enough in those communities, especially when you first arrive here, newly arrived young people. And again, that's no fault of their own. I feel like it just takes some time to, when you come to a new community and you understand that mental health is an actual thing. Because a lot of us from a lot of refugee migrant communities, or if you come and you first migrated to Australia or a new country, it's not something like mental health is really brought up. We all talk about physical health, but it really takes some time and understanding to learn what mental health is.
Yeah.
And it takes some time to understand, to learn that what that is in your own language as well. So it's not
Yeah.
very, it's not always able to be communicated best in English. You need to learn about it in your own language, or what your mother tongue is. And then in that sense too, there's so many terms that come with it as well. Um, so I feel like that's a conversation discussion that really needs to keep being communicated and evolved into a space where a lot of young men are able to really freely discuss it. I think that's the space that's going to keep evolving, and hopefully it does keep evolving in a positive light.
Yeah. Are you guys also finding that maybe conversation is not necessarily happening unless it's like Men's Mental Health Month? I feel like that's like the only time I ever see people like having discussion. And it's not even discussion, like people will repost stuff and then that's sort of it. Like
I think I'm like very like yes and no. I think more of I feel like it's more happening. Men's mental health month is good because it's really starting the conversation, but I've actually seen more of it starting throughout the year as well. So I've seen a lot of men, especially from diverse backgrounds, who have actually stepped up on like social media and Instagram especially.
Instagram definitely.
Which is really good because either they're their own advocates who are really shouting out what they've
experienced. Oh, you've gone mute, Jay. We can't hear you. You're talking and we can't hear you. No, I still can't hear you.
He's still on.
He's talking to himself now. He's just like giving himself advice.
Yeah.
But that's interesting what it was saying. Yeah, that's it. Does
anyone want to add on, go on from there?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing, Jagesh. Like I've seen a few posts on Instagram where like teenagers are talking about their experiences based on their upbringing, and also how that's affecting them. And like it surprised me how honest it was, because we're all here because like we work with a lot of, or we talk with a lot of men who find it hard to talk about mental health, whereas these kids are doing it, right? Like they're being honest about it. So I think social media has become like a platform for people to be able to express those things that I guess our generation might not have been as good at.
Yeah, very good point. I've seen a lot more of it too with the younger generation, almost leading the way and showing the oldies how to do it. I just wanted to add to that that I suppose where I've seen a lot more of it, and I was thinking like where is it evident? Because obviously I see it every day working at Blokes Psych, but in a lot of the football pages, and I'm a tragic Carlton supporter and love my football, so there's a lot of mental health in that. I see a lot more of the reactions are more considered now. There is a lot more where it used to be, a very hyper masculine, that could be considered toxic kind of space, whereas any vulnerability would be shut down. I think a lot more you're finding it's being taken seriously. And I think, the passing of, I don't know whether you guys know Danny Frawley. He was a footballer who passed away by suicide. I think it was last year. That was a really significant change in the landscape within the football kind of community. And, in Melbourne especially, it's like a religion in Melbourne. So I think that a lot of people really started to take it a little bit more seriously and bring it up a little more after that. That's kind of what I've noticed, I suppose.
That's actually such a great point. I love the point about, I guess, sports and mental health. And I think that's a really great space. This is just taking me to like when famous people pass away due to sort of like mental health issues. Like so Robin Williams, And then within the South Asian community last year, we had this huge thing about Sushant Singh Rajput, and he had committed suicide. And it did, sadly, like that was the reason people were asking questions, but it was so shocking because it's like, well, this person looked really happy and they were making lots of money and they were doing so well in their career. Like, how did this happen? But I think that's the whole point, right? Is like, we don't have conversation. How are you actually going to know what's going on in people's lives? You can't predict anything. And I'm wondering whether these bigger organizations and spaces need to be doing more around mental health promotion, because that's probably where the audience is at, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly say, I think it's good that a lot of sporting leagues and more broadly, more organizations have taken that quite seriously now. So I know like the NBA, National Basketball Association, now has a mental health policy. The AFL, I think, are doing some like good work in that, and I feel like Tom Boyd from the Western Bulldogs, who's a former player, really started that discussion to really get into the spotlight, because a lot of like why he retired was because of mental health, and you see basketball players like Kevin Love in the NBA really standing up for mental health now, and I really think that's how it grows. So if players and spectators and people who are actually playing the game or people who are actually in the know start discussing it a bit more, then that's when people start taking it seriously, and these organizations start standing up and be like, well, if it's affecting our players, the people who we pay, big money to do these things, then it's a real necessarily conversation that needs to be had.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's great. This is a really good question. Do you think sport as an industry is doing enough to address mental health among young men? And how can sports programs support good mental health outcomes?
I think in regards to that, I think once organized sport is started at a younger age, I think the conversation just has to be there, like just emphasize a little bit more. For example, stuff like tennis programs and Auskick, things like that. I think coaches and sporting people in their own right should be reminding kids at a younger age that it's okay to have these conversations. Like even after you do a bit of training, I think now in this day and age, coaches should just really come back to it's okay to speak about it. Someone like, does anyone want to put their hand up? What is everyone going through? Just kind of emphasize it and remind them it's okay to have the conversation. So I think for sure it needs to be done at a younger age in organized sport.
I think you're right, Dev, and I think like from the beginning, I wonder if there's a space for creating that culture, right? Because like in some sports, you might see that if someone talks about mental health, they actually get a lot of criticism, right? They'll get people saying, "Oh, you're just a whinger," or "Oh, you're just scared because of X, Y, Z," kind of thing. So I wonder if it's starting initiatives where I don't know, coaches are trained to be able to create those kinds of spaces, or organizations are able to create those kinds of spaces where they kind of shift the language and how they treat other players and people around there.
No, but you know what? That's such a great point, Chris. Like language use is so important, right? Like what are some examples of the way that we should be encouraging? Like it almost feels like this needs to be like, and my brain's gone to social media in terms of like, when you post on like your page and you're like, do this instead of this, like what is the language that we should be using, especially young men should be using with each other, or even, older men should be using with each other instead. Like, how do we not brush off people's mental health issues? Like, what does that actually look like?
I think for me, it comes back to a lot of positive reinforcement. So if you, for example, if you hear that your friend has taken that first step to get therapy, you should absolutely be reinforcing them, like giving them a little round of applause and be like, yes, it's okay. You can do this. Yeah, you can do it. I think it really comes back to positive reinforcement. And people respond. People respond to affirmations. People respond to kind words. I think for sure at a younger age, people just need to know again, like, it's okay. You can go and get help, and it's completely fine to do that. And that positive reinforcement, I think, needs to be emphasized a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely love that. I think that's great. What what was I going to ask next? I guess we've got a question that's up here, and it goes, how do you educate parents around supporting, I guess, young men or boys, or, around mental health? It's a very broad question, but I might throw that one to Dan and Chris.
Yeah, sorry, I was lagging a little bit. Am I back now? Can you guys see me okay?
You are back, yeah.
Great, cool. Can you just repeat that question, Anushka, please?
How do you educate parents?
Oh, parents. Yeah,
Parents,
so I think starting early. I mentioned a little bit earlier that fatherhood is a little bit of my passion area, due to having been a dad now for 2 years and having gone through that transition and kind of experiencing some of those points where you do find that it can be isolating. It can, that if it wasn't the kind of environment where you're well supported, I could see mental health just flourishing. So I think that in those spaces of parenting, there is a lot of difficulty and change. And I think that the idea around mental health all the way through that, starting from birth all the way through, I think there needs to be a little bit more around education. Almost, I wouldn't say mandatory, but there needs to be really strongly encouraged and implemented these strategies around the way to look for signs in kids that it's not just about the big overt tantrums or the really silent withdrawals. It can be things that are a little bit more nuanced and subtle that you can pick up in your children if they're not doing too well, and start to take those first steps. And so I think, to be honest, I think it's probably got to happen at a governmental level where they throw money at certain programs. But I'm not sure. What do you guys think?
I completely agree with you, Dan, and I agree that it should be something as macro as that and as early as that, and I think there are little bits and pieces, right? And there's a lot more work that can be done, and some places to start could be places like raisingchildren.net.au. So that's a government-funded website where the information that's on it is from experts, but put into plain English. So like anyone can pick it up, look at it. It doesn't tell you what to do, right? It's like, here's the information. You make your
do
call,
what you want with
right?
It.
So places like that are a good place to start. But then I guess, if say people like us are talking with parents, it can be quite tricky, right? Because parents have certain things that they focus on and want to work on, right? And it might not align exactly with how that child might want things if they're a little older, right? So we need to go with people's motivations. So we need to look at, okay, well, what does that parent want for that child, and start there. That usually helps open the door.
No, I think that's such a great point. I was just thinking, working with parents, it can be both difficult, and I think one thing that I would put out to parents is that if you're coming to get support for your child, it doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. If anything, it means that you're an amazing parent, because you're getting, because the number of times that I've seen parents that have been like, and they hesitate to come and talk to you, or they think that like they're going to bring their child into therapy and you're going to fix them. That's not, therapists don't fix things. I mean, we do. A little bit sometimes. It's a bit complicated. It's more complicated than that, but we can't just fix your child. And 98% of the time, if a child is having a problem, and this isn't just to do with boys, it's to do with girls as well, it's that it comes from the home environment and parenting and what's going on. So definitely be taking on any advice and be open to taking on advice from psychs that are seeing your kids, because I think that's super important. Doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It just might mean that, you're going to get some advice that you probably haven't previously gotten. I had one comment. I had a thought that came into my mind earlier on when we were talking about the South Asian community and migrant parents. And I thought to myself, I was like, our parents were so busy trying to build a life for us that the idea of sorting out their own mental health wasn't even on the agenda. And like, I'm wondering whether if now, and I see this a lot in my community, and it's, a lot in my community now, where like the older men sort of have come about and being like, oh, like we might have something, but we might not. Like I feel like I need to talk to someone about stuff because, you know, even migrating is like really, really tough sort of situation, right? And that can cause a lot of mental health issues and stress and anxiety and depression. But it's just like they never acknowledged it. And like now when like children are moving out of home and like you're like left sort of alone and it's just you and your partner, it's almost like, oh, should I be talking to someone? How do you even go about it promoting that, you know? Because I think Chris and I discussed this on another panel where we're like, how do you get parents to go to therapy? They probably need it. Like it's about time that you address your own stuff and like the life and the purpose that you have, you know, raising your family, building your house, and you know, you get to the end and it's like, now what? That now what feeling is something that I'm seeing a lot.
This is the thing as well, and I've spoke to Jay and Anushka about this as well, and she brings up a really good point. When our parents were migrating, were like literally picking up their whole life and moving to a different country, mental health wasn't on the forefront of their mind. On the forefront of their mind was working 2 jobs, putting my kids through school, putting food on the table. Mental health was not something that they were having a conversation about because it was like, I've got 1,000 other things to do. Who cares about what I'm going through at the moment?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think in this generation, we need to keep in mind that our parents have done so much for us. They've moved their whole lives. They've worked 2 jobs. They've put us through school. We need to keep in mind that, you know, now especially, we should be going to them and asking, hey, are you okay? Let's have a chat. Yeah. Just normalizing that conversation and keeping in mind as well that, you know, that our parents, obviously they deserve to be happy and we can play our part. Yeah, we just need to play our part and ask them at what they're going through as well.
No, I think such a great point. I think having that reverse conversation with your parents is very, very important, especially like, you know, with your dads, guys. I don't know. I think look, a lot of the research that I did last year, especially within the South Asian community, men don't talk about mental health, but they also like, we have this core Asian value around emotional regulation. And you're not supposed to feel things. You're supposed to be strong. And so if that's already prominent within your culture, and then the societal culture, like in general, is also like, you know, men have to be strong. You've got 2 different sets and spaces that are telling you that you're not supposed to have any issues and you're not supposed to talk about anything. You're supposed to be able to regulate yourself. And I just think it causes a lot more issues than we actually realize. Just on like, I guess an ending. Oh, here we go. +1, Dev's point, parents' experiences and reverse dialogue where it's safe to do so. Yeah, love that. I guess the thing that I wanted to finish up with is the South Asian LGBTQI community, and I guess men and coming out, and its impact on mental health. And I think this also, generally speaking, not even just the South Asian community, but also in general, what is, and I know this could be like an entire talk on its own, but what are the stigmas, what are the barriers, and how can we encourage to make change around that?
So yeah, I've got a really short answer to a part of that. I think one thing to think about is safety, right? Because you know, with a lot of our families, our parents, like they have very traditional views, right?
Yeah.
And I do have, you know, a bunch of clients where there's a clash in values, and you know, it's very hard to get parents to see different perspectives. So that's one thing to consider, you know, like how will you have that conversation? When is a good time? Who's going to be there to support you? What, you know, what's a plan B if things don't go that well? So that's one thing to consider.
Yeah, I think that's great. Any others, guys?
Yeah. I can speak to it from, I have a client who recently came out as trans and is going through that that kind of discovery of self a lot in terms of who they are. And unfortunately, there's been a big pushback from their family, and it's been very difficult. And I think that a lot of the things that people who go through that, you know, coming out and you know, walking this very difficult path experience is a lot of disconnection. And I think that in terms of, I suppose, looking in and things that as therapists we could perhaps start to encourage is communities outside of those that are immediate, things that are perhaps, communities online, in groups that are there ready and waiting to support and to find and to, fill that, almost providing a net before coming out, to provide that almost net to catch you when potentially people do turn and have opinions that, are very confronting. And I think that that's something that this client of mine has really found beneficial, is talking online to like-minded people who are going through a lot of the same stuff.
I think that's such a great point. Well, in order to wrap up, I just wanted to maybe go around and quickly, if you can give the audience one thing to take away from today, what would it be? And I'm going to go around in a circle like I would at school. So, Jay, what about you? What's one takeaway from today?
Yeah, I think I would take away from today is just encourage more men to really start the conversation and start speaking up. And what I've actually liked today is that we've had like a couple of guys actually give some really good comments, which is really good. So it's a really good start. So I would just really love to say that we really, really need to keep that conversation going. And I would love to see a lot of older men who are thought leaders or, have respect in the community really start that conversation and really start, perpetuating that conversation, whether it's from, in the community hall, whether it's in their religious sense of being, whether it's out in public. I would really love to see a lot of older men who do have that respect in the community to really start that conversation of mental health going forward for men.
Amazing. Dave, what about you?
Me, I think if I had like a final word to say, it really comes back to me letting people know it's okay and giving your friends, especially your close group of friends, like Jay was saying beforehand, I'm a big believer in normalizing conversations in your close group of friends. Because like Jay was saying, if you can't have those conversations with the person you call your best friend or your bro, then how are you going to have that conversation with other people? How do you expect to have the conversation and facilitate it with other people if you can't do it in your closest group of friends first? And for me, it comes back to really positive affirmations and reinforcement. So if you know someone is going through a tough time and they're taking that first step, absolutely give them a little round of applause and let them know that they're doing okay, because that's the first step to a better path, I swear. Yeah.
Love that. Chris, what about you?
That's some really good advice. So I'll I guess my message is to mental health practitioners like us in general. We need to make it easier for men to seek out help. We need to recognize what is difficult or what's uncomfortable about seeking help, and we need to make things easier with our language, with our materials, with giving information on services and how to access services as well. So that's our responsibility, I reckon.
Love that. And Dan?
Yeah, no, I really love that, Chris. That's brilliant. And what I was thinking is really encouraging people to walk through the fire. It's going to be really difficult. It's not easy. It's outside of your comfort zone. Getting help is outside of your comfort zone, no matter how normalized it is. Starting that conversation and being vulnerable with someone is hard, no matter how experienced you are at doing it. And to know that there's never a right time, that it's always going to be hard, and that if you are even thinking it might be a possibility for you, that's the sign to do it. I think, and just to know it's tough, but to do it anyway, because the benefits are there. And once you start the ball rolling, the trajectory can change very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it this way, everyone. What is the worst thing that could come out of it? You'll go to a session, you might enjoy it, and it might be good for you. You might go to a session and it might not be good. Also bearing in mind that if you are going to seek help, that maybe the first practitioner you see might not be the person that is for you, and that's okay as well. Keep exploring options. I know it's really difficult to go from one therapist to another therapist, but when you find the right fit, it definitely makes all of the difference in the world. On that note, the So on that note, one of the things that I wanted to put out there is the number for men's line. So 1300-789-978, just in case anyone needs it. If you want to find Dan, you can find him at Blokes Psychology. If you want to find Dev and Jagesh, and you should definitely go and follow their page because it is so, so wonderful. It's at Shakti Mental Health Melbourne. Is it the Instagram handle right? Yeah, did I get it right? Okay, cool. And then if you want to find Chris, Enhancing Minds, you can also find him on Instagram. His content is great. 11 out of 10. If you want to find me, I'm at Umeed Psychology. I also run a podcast called The Shore Project, so you can find me on both of those. Any other handles you guys want to plug? Did I cover them all? I feel like I did.
Yeah.
I think you got a good grip on it. But Anushka, what's your final words? We didn't get to hear your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are that I was really looking forward to this panel for a long time. And I think that I have learned so much from you guys. And I really love this discussion. And I feel super grateful that I've had this opportunity. Y'all have been great. And I think we've touched on a lot of really important topics that could be explored further and further. And Dev and Jay know, actually Chris knows this as well, so Dan's new. But my brain works so fast, and immediately right now is there are so many things that we could be doing. And Dan was like, if someone throws money, I'm like, throw money at us. We can make things happen. Let's go.
That's it, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. 100%. If someone gave me funding, I'd be like, cool, let's get out into the community. Also, my brain is going to places like, what kind of research needs to be done? What are we not doing? Yeah.
Love
because
that. Love that.
We don't.
Well, that brain needs to be in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a gap and we need to fill it. So why not? I would highly encourage anyone who is out there and listening to this who has ideas around stuff, don't be afraid to embrace those ideas and just go with it, because it is super important.
I agree. Yes.
Cool. That's
absolutely.
mine.
Great point.
Cool. Well, anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for taking out the time. I know it's a Sunday night. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Really appreciate it. Cool. Until next time.